to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into Dynasty. Welcome to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, but that's right. Tonight, we're not going to be talking about Devy per se. We're going to be talking about some of the young bloods, some of the youth in Dynasty, see if we can get some breakouts and possibly find some overrated players as well. But you know I can't do it alone. We got to bring on our favorite co-host. I'm just going to stick with the favorites until they both show up. Aaron Wilcox, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing well. The definition of the term young blood, at least based on the Cambridge Dictionary, is a term used to describe a newcomer or a younger person who brings fresh energy, vitality, and new ideas to an older team, organization, or environment. So I am excited to discuss just that with you, especially in the Dynasty landscape. That's kind of what got John and I, podcasting, what got us together as far as playing in fantasy football leagues, diving into prospect evaluation and everything. It started more on the Dynasty side. So really that was our forte. That was our maybe strong suit, right, to start with. And then obviously the prospect evaluation and everything on the college side really, came together as well. So yes, excited to get back to our roots.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for the definition. That definitely sounds about right. And, everyone is infatuated with youth and the young bloods in Dynasty. And we don't get into the Dynasty part of it as much. But, maybe we should. And when there's a slow period in college football, there's not that much going on besides even more Brendan Sorsby news today. We can take time and actually look at some of these younger players and see who might break out, who might not break out, all that kind of stuff. And Aaron's absolutely right. When we started out, I didn't even watch college football. I didn't know anything about college football. I mean, I grew up a Florida Gators fan, and I watched that kind of stuff, but that was really it. I didn't hardly know anything about it. Then we started the Devy Devotional, and we've grown from there. All I did was just ask questions when we started. I didn't really have anything. I didn't have Devy Beth. I didn't have Beth. I didn't have anything yet. So we have definitely taken some strides since then. But here we are, and we are here to talk about some of these players that we were extremely excited about at one point, or maybe not as excited about, but maybe we think can break out, or maybe the complete opposite, where we might pump some brakes on people saying, hey, this player is ready. He's going to take that next step. Say, I don't know. We'll see. But we're not going to be talking about your Devontae Adams. We're not going to be talking about your Derrick Henrys or anything today, but we will be talking about some of the young blood, some of the youth in Dynasty. But to start us out, I wanted to look at last year, and DLF does a great job of keeping ADP and monthly and having access to that is awesome. So went to DLF and brought up the 2025 June ADP. So this time last year. And I think this is the time of year where, for the most part, rookie drafts are done. If we're just talking about like strictly Dynasty leagues, maybe even your Devy leagues, most of the time you've probably already done your Devy drafts and things. But at the very least, your rookie drafts are done. And you're starting to look forward to the future. You're starting to think of this year. Can I compete and all that kind of stuff? And everyone thinks their team is amazing right now. They have no holes to fill. They have nothing that they need to work on because they already filled all those holes with their first, second, third, fourth, and fifth round rookie picks and everything that they brought onto their team and trades they've made, whatever it might be. But I think when we go back and look at some of this ADP, you might figure out that it might not be all, rosy goggles and everything when it's all said and done, because it's some of this ADP is a little scary. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Last year was very interesting as far as some of the guys that were going so highly. So yeah, no, let's shout out some of those names just to make everybody aware of like maybe where they were last year, and obviously diving into the most interesting aspects will be this year's. But I'm just going back to appreciate it. Like Bucky Irving was RB8, so I don't know if that just shows you that. I mean, obviously, there's a ton of volatility to the running back position in general, in redraft and dynasty, you name it. I mean, that position, I would say, dropped off a bit at that point, but it was like Jonathan Taylor, then it was Bucky Irving, then it was Marion Hampton, Kyron Williams. So there was a drop off there, right? Maybe a little bit of a tier break for dynasty purposes, but yes, that just seemed like very, very high, basically.
Well, I think it just shows you I feel like we're kind of in a transition period where we're starting to age out some of these older players that have been studs for years, and we're finally starting to get to some of these younger players that we've said, hey, Joe Mixon and whoever else are going to be replaced, for years and years and years, and it didn't really happen as quickly as some people thought it was going to happen. But now that it actually is, you're starting to see that kind of stuff where like Bucky Irving was a fourth round pick in the NFL draft. He was a later pick in our rookie drafts, but then he went out and was a complete stud in year one. He's a young guy. Boom, he's gonna jump up to a top 10, top 8 back. It doesn't really surprise me, honestly. Like I wouldn't even say I want to take too much away from that one, and I'm not saying don't take anything away from it because obviously like it I think the point is going to be always don't just push people up just because of youth. Now, I don't necessarily think that was the case with Bucky, and obviously he dealt with injury. His offensive line dealt with injury. His quarterback dealt with injury. His wide receiver core dealt with injury last year. There was a lot of stuff going on with the Bucs, so I don't want to put it all into Bucky, but I don't know that we can truly say that he's guaranteed a full workload and stuff like that today, that even if he didn't have the injury and all that kind of stuff, would we still consider him a top 8? I don't know, maybe not. So definitely a good one to start with, but
Yeah,
some of these,
and the youth too. Just to jump in as well, like,
yeah.
you're right. I think that is part of it, though. It has to be because you look further down the list of running backs. Christian McCaffrey was RB15 in Dynasty, which I mean, I don't know if he was actually going there in actual startup drafts, right? People get so infatuated with that RB1 type of production. But then there was Josh Jacobs. James Cook was RB17. Kenneth Walker was RB18. So all those guys were available well after a guy like a Bucky Irving, that early in draft. So that's just kind of an interesting thing. Again, being in the dynasty format, people are going to push down those guys who are starting to age a little bit, but unless they're truly like in their 30s and looking like they're washed, I mean, we still know that we can get some valuable years out of some of these running backs.
Yeah, I mean, think about some of the running backs that were being pushed up last year, like your Woody Marks and players like that. Where people are saying, "Oh, there's no one ahead of them," and
Caleb
next thing
Johnson.
you know, yeah, well, yeah, Caleb Johnson, obviously,
He was
yeah,
RB19.
yeah.
RB19 in Dynasty. That's crazy.
So we definitely see the youth movement there, but with the wide receivers, you probably even see it even more, just because we're so used to doing it. And I think there was a time in Dynasty where, it brings me back to like the Mike Evans, OBJ time period Dynasty where. Like there was such a difference there where all of a sudden this youth movement came in. They were studs in year one, and people had to like change the way they looked at Dynasty and change the way they did their rankings because it was like, no, OBJ is wide receiver 1, Mike Evans is wide receiver 2, like whatever it is. And even though they haven't hardly done anything, well, then I think we went a little too hard for a few years on just putting up Juju Smith-Schuster's the wide receiver 1, and we did that for a little bit, and then I think we've learned our lesson, but maybe not quite enough because we see players like Lad McConkey in June of 2025 was the wide receiver 10 overall, 15th player overall. So you're talking about an early second round pick in a startup, one QB startup, of course, but that's what we're looking at today, the one QB data. But still, you're talking about a very early pick. Marvin Harrison Jr., MHJ, right behind him, wide receiver 11. Brian Thomas, BTJ, wide receiver 7, a first round startup pick. And now just think about, how we feel about BTJ, or at least how the consensus feels about BTJ today. Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown, wide receiver 14, starting to get into some of the players that, like AJ Brown definitely had an up and down year. But just think, you'd probably be feeling pretty good if you got AJ Brown at wide receiver 14. Travis Hunter, wide receiver 15. I mean, that one's the most
Yeah,
egregious of them all. That's just
that one
absolutely
is.
wild.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that just puts into perspective like how much one year can change things and the perspective on these players. And Zay Flowers down there at wide receiver 24, and obviously he had a very nice bounce back season, regardless of catching passes for Lamar Jackson, not known as the highest volume or the most sophisticated passer out there, still was able to fuel a very like top 10-ish season out of Zay Flowers last year. It was an impressive year. So, yep, some value to be had in these middle rounds of these dynasty drafts. And I don't know, are there other guys that you wanted to point out there? I think George Pickens was interesting. Obviously, we didn't know how things were going to play out. Very volatile player, but George Pickens finishing as like a top 5-ish type of wide receiver in scoring last year, and he was going in the wide receiver 30s in that ADP. That's crazy.
It is, although I will say that's just George Pickens in a nutshell.
Yeah,
Like you
you
could,
don't know what you're
would
getting.
you have been like he was top 5? Would you have been surprised if he was top 55? Like if he was out of the
Yeah.
top 50? Like I don't think either one of them would have surprised us. We obviously know that CD dealt with injuries. I think people are trying to come to terms with that now. Like, how do you properly rate George Pickens while expecting CD to be fully healthy and all that kind of stuff? I think we also have. I feel like a lot of people have talked about CD and George and Pickens and Dak and the Cowboys, and they don't really talk about. They've really focused on their defense this offseason. They've really done a lot to try to make that terrible defense from last year at least somewhat respectable. They might not have to be in as many, shootouts as they were in last year. They might not have to throw 50 times a game just to stay in a game anymore. I'm not saying they won't be viable players or anything, but it does kind of freak me out when you think about like a Pickens. People are still all about him, and then you start talking about they might not have to throw as much. CD's fully healthy. Next thing you know, he's not top 5. He's top 25 or top 30 or whatever it is, and it's not nearly the same. But Pickens, like I said, that's kind of like one of those random players that I could really see almost any ending with him, and I'd be yeah, that's George Pickens for you.
So looking ahead to this year, I mean, do you have some strong thoughts right off the bat for 2026, or anybody else that you wanted to shout out from the 25 data?
No, we could keep going. I mean, there's obviously even more players, but I think we got to the most egregious ones, especially Travis Hunter. And I mean, I know it's easy in hindsight, and obviously we can be wrong. And I know you were more on the Travis Hunter train than I ever was, but I don't think you were never extreme about it. You were never like, oh yeah, you got to draft him ahead of Tad or anything like some of these people were doing. But I do think it's just there's one player every year where I feel like you can go back and just say why. And I know we've kind of touched on this in previous pods, but like Travis Hunter was definitely that guy. It's like you're asking for so much for this player to be a full-time two-way player, and he had never truly proven it as a wide receiver. He had done okay in the Big 12 and stuff, and like, why are we drafting him as wide receiver 15 overall? Like, it just don't do it. And like I said, it's really easy to say that now, but honestly, I felt the same way back then. So let's see this year if we can find any. So I'm back to the 2026 startup ADP, and right off the bat, I'm seeing Ashton Genty at 8 overall, RB3. Are we doing the youth thing again here? And I'm not trying to hate on Genty by any means. It's just the first one that's popped up. I'm gonna go down the get down the list, and we'll talk about more. But obviously he had a down year. Obviously was on a terrible team, and that had a lot to do with it. Brock Bowers was hurt for half of the season, if not more. Their quarterback situation was absolutely terrible. Geno was god awful. Offensive line was bad. Everything was bad. We expect things to be better this year. New coaches, new QBs, new offensive line, new everything. but we're already putting Ginty essentially at his peak, like at his ceiling. Like we don't expect him to all of a sudden beat Bijan or Gibbs. So I mean, if that's the case, we're essentially drafting him and putting him at his ceiling. It's going to be a lot hard. It's going to be hard for him to go anywhere but down from where he's ranked. And would it really blow your mind if they still have some growing pains, in kind of like year 2 of this full rebuild and bringing in once again, you can look at it as a good thing, but once again, new coach, new QB, new offensive line, it's all new. So you can also look at it as a bad thing as well.
Yeah, you highlighted some reasons for optimism there. And so while I could take, certainly like a CD Lamb ahead of Ashton Jeanty, though the ADP is not reflecting that, I will say that you look behind Jeanty, and I mean, there's also risk for a lot of these other running backs there too, unfortunately. It's just kind of how that position is right now with Jeremiah Love coming in. Hey, I love Love, right? I am very much a big fan of Jeremiah Love and have been for years, but I mean, even he's not coming into the best situation. So again, situational concerns there. A-Chain, I mean, same deal as far as the situational concerns there at Miami. Is he going to get as many targets as well with Malik Willis playing the quarterback position? I don't know. And then you start going down Amarian Hampton. I think he's a big fade at RB6, to be honest. I think he's too much of a plotter for NFL purposes. And then you get to the aging guys like the James Cooks of the world, the Jonathan Taylors of the world, and Christian McCaffrey, RB9, which is funny that he was RB15 last June, but now he's RB9. Like, what happened to the running back position? I don't get that.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned James Cook, Jonathan Taylor. They were down pretty low as well. So, I mean, all 3 of those guys moved up, obviously, based off of great seasons for all 3. But now I wonder, it's almost like, have we gone too far? Because now you're looking like JT had an amazing season, but it was completely pushed up by, touchdowns. And, you look at the touchdowns, you expect some pretty massive regression without even talking about the fact that he doesn't have a healthy QB. We don't really know what all is going on with that offense and everything. Now are we kind of doing the opposite where we did the youth movement for a year or two. Now we're pushing up these old guys. What happens when these old guys actually fail this year? Are we going to go back to the youth movement next year? And maybe it's just because some of those, some of those running backs like your Buckies and players like that were younger, did kind of fail last year or, at least struggle at the very least. But, I'm looking at, like I was saying with Ginty, just being a top 10 player overall in a dynasty startup, it's just like, it's a little too much for me. I would definitely lean your wide receivers or your Brock Bowers or somebody like that there. Obviously, we get into super flex, then you can even talk about your QBs and things as well. I'm not going QB and one QB here, but then, you talked about Jeremiah Love, and it kind of makes me think, especially when you're looking at like startup ADP. And I wish I could remember what the actual trade was, but I essentially traded 101 Jeremiah Love and like something slightly extra. I don't remember exactly what it was for Jahmyr Gibbs. And I'm just thinking now, especially, like Jahmyr Gibbs, 4th overall, RB2. I mean, in my own rankings, I have him as RB1, but here in DLF's ADP, 4th overall, RB2, and then you have Jeremiah Love at 12th overall, RB4. I feel so much more comfortable with Jahmyr Gibbs and everything that's going on with his team and his situation and everything. I feel like he's set up for his best year ever than I do just 10 spots later. Overall, you're still talking about a 1st-round pick in Jeremiah Love, and I'm once again, I love Love as well. I love the player. I do not love the situation, and I think it could be a slow start, which is why I made that trade. And it's just like, they're not even that separated by that much, and yet I feel so much better about Jahmyr Gibbs.
Well, I do love Gibbs in his situation this year, but I think long term the Jeremiah Love talent will show out there, and he's still going to get peppered with targets as like a main featured guy in that backfield, and he's also got some guys behind him who can kind of spell him, which will keep him fresh. But as a 21-year-old player and just so explosive, and he's got the size and receiving chops and everything, I don't think that you can go wrong either way if you want to pivot to the young blood. Like he's an awesome option, and I think I might consider just pivoting off of Janty to Jeremiah Love, in fact, but they're back to back in running back rankings. So I guess I can't get too picky there. But I'm actually going to shout out a guy further down the board that I actually think has a bounce back season here. And you see arguments on Twitter like, is he the wide receiver 3 on his own team? And that's Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jaguars. And I'm not saying that he's going to have like a top 5 wide receiver type of season, but we saw a resurgence with Trevor Lawrence last season. And then also we saw, yes, Parker Washington, yep, he had a hot streak there, right? But after him, I mean, he's not going to command a 30+% target share, anything crazy, right? I mean, Parker Washington, he is what he is. He's a solid wide receiver. But Brian Thomas, he showed us something that was very special as a rookie player at the NFL level. He was a good prospect. He went high in the NFL draft. He showed that athleticism. Clearly was not 100% this last year. So I'm not going to give him a total pass. He's dropped a lot in value. So going 43rd overall, wide receiver 25. I think when we're talking about young bloods, guys who are still pretty young in their career. He's 23 years old, and we've seen really, really nice production from him, and he's got some stability there within the coaching staff, within the quarterback play. And I mean, like you said, what's his name? Travis Hunter, he's just so overrated. I think people are still thinking, oh, he's going to cut in a lot of targets and this and that. I just don't see it there for Hunter, and I definitely see it more so with Brian Thomas, potentially being that alpha, getting healthy, getting right.
Yeah, I'm with you here, and I think we're talking about extremes here. And Brian Thomas was at the extreme last year of being wide receiver 7 overall in the same June ADP, and now he's wide receiver 25 overall. And it's like, yeah, I understand he had a down year. I understand he had some issues, but did he really drop that much, or people just butt hurt because it didn't work out, that you didn't win that championship you thought you were going to win, and things like that. And we just touched on Travis Hunter. I actually made a executive decision, and I took him, or I won't say I took him out of my rankings, because I think that would be a little extreme, but I essentially knocked him down like a full tier of my rankings, because I'm just to the point where I think if you look at that team and just use some common sense, they have a solid wide receiver core with BTJ, Jacoby Myers, and Parker Washington. Then you can get into your Brenton Stranges and your whoever else and all that kind of stuff. And you could say that they're pretty solid there. Where do they need help? They need help on the defensive side. And I just really think, it just makes way too much sense for them to use Travis Hunter on the defensive side. He's not the biggest guy. How could he be? He's a corner. He can't really be too big, or he'd probably be talking about a safety or something like that. So if you want him to be your corner for you, he probably needs to stay at that size, stay at that athleticism, and that's just we've seen that's probably not going to lead towards playing 100 snaps a game and doing it in the NFL. And we knew it was going to be difficult to do anyway. I think it's even, now we kind of know it's probably not going to happen. Will he see the field as a wide receiver? Yes. And the Parker Washington thing kind of blows my mind, because you have some people that will talk about the way they love Parker Washington, the way they feel about him. Like they would give up a first-round pick or something this year. And then you have other people that wouldn't even give you a fourth. I've been trying in our OG auction league, I've been trying to sell him, not to just get him off my team. Like I actually like Parker Washington, like you said, as a solid wide receiver. But I have so much depth in that league, and I'm just trying to do a 2-for-1, 3-for-1 special. Just give me like one, quality player back, because I have all these like wide receiver 2s and 3s and stuff like that. No one wants to value Parker Washington at all. At least not the way that like I said, randomly you'll hear someone to be like, yeah, Parker Washington's the truth, and yada yada yada. So that whole wide receiver core is pretty wild, but BTJ did it as a true rookie, as a first year player. I don't think he's completely fallen off, and I don't think that it was just a complete fluke. He was a top 5 prospect for me in that season, for a reason, and I think he's going to continue on. So yeah, I like that call out. Wide receiver 25 is just way too low, and and but I'm looking in. You had mentioned Zay Flowers as a player last year. I think he was right around that wide receiver 25 range, right? Is that what you said? Well, he's only moved up to wide receiver 23. And I just don't understand it because, like I said, we're generally we tend to lean towards the youth, and I get that Lamar Jackson had a terrible year. He missed half the season, or part of the season at the very least. Things were not great. Yet Zay Flowers was a top 10 wide receiver last year. Now, and that was with terrible quarterback play. So, like, now you say, hey, what if the quarterback's better? What if Lamar's better? What if he's fully healthy? What if he's all this? Okay, so are we going to continue on with top 10 wide receiver production? Oh, wait, he's 25 years old as well. I just don't understand how you can have that. Like, the Brian Thomas one, I kind of get because he really did hurt people's teams. Like, if you had BTJ last year, you were struggling. If especially if you were banking on him, if he was wide receiver 7 and you drafted him there, you were in pain. You were hurting. Zay Flowers, you got for wide receiver 25 prices, and then he gave you wide receiver 7 finish. Like, there was no reason for you to be mad at Zay Flowers or hold anything against him. If anything, you would think it can only go up, really, because last year was such a bad year, down year for the Ravens and all that kind of stuff. I really feel like if you're holding Zay Flowers down here, you were saying either Lamar's toast and like he's just not going to get back to what he is. But then if you go look at Lamar's dynasty rankings and stuff, that's not what the ADP is telling us. Or you're just holding something against Zay Flowers for no reason whatsoever. And I think I'm kind of leaning towards that. It just doesn't feel right because we think of Lamar as this run first guy and all that kind of stuff, but he dinks and dunks to Zay so much now. And Zay is so explosive that he's able to do big things with that. And that's why you're able to see these like 30-point games out of him when you have a healthy Lamar and a healthy Zay. And as much as I love Elijah Surratt, even Jacoby Lane is young and could become something eventually, like that kind of thing. I don't think either one of those players is holding Zay Flowers back. And if anything, having like a healthy presence with Elijah Surratt on the other side of the field could be a really good thing for Zay, kind of opening up the field even more.
Yeah, no, those are excellent points with his ADP, and even though he's a little bit of an old blood, we'll give Zay Flowers some recognition there. But speaking of a young blood that I wanted to highlight, tight end 7 right now, Harold Fannin. I'm thinking, why is he 3 spots behind Tyler Warren? Like he outproduced Tyler Warren, or at least Tyler Warren. I mean, he looked atrocious down the stretch, right? Yes, he was peppered for spurts of the season, Warren was. But, as far as consistency season long, Fannin, he was the better, more steady guy. He was tight end 6 last year in PPR and half PPR formats in tight ends. He went over 100 targets for the season with all the volatility that was going on there with the quarterback room. Yes, there might be some more of that volatility this year for the Browns, right? But more of the same. He was able to produce despite that last year. And the guy is still 21 years old. Like Harold Fannin, he just gets it done. He's got it done at the college level, very much a high-end producer, even a lower level of competition. He was just like Trey McBride, right? Trey McBride dominated at Colorado State. We saw that Harold Fannin, he did awesome things at Bowling Green, and then he's a young NFL stud tight end, but he's just being devalued. He's ranked behind, or in ADP, he's going behind Kyle Pitts, behind the injured Tucker Kraft. I get Tucker Kraft's coming back, right? I mean, the guy's a dog. He's a great, fun player to root for. I like Tucker Kraft, but I mean, he's coming off of a major injury. And then Tyler Warren. I don't think any of those guys are like clearly ahead of Harold Fannin, but you can get Fannin for cheaper. I love that value for Fannin, but he is a guy where I think we'll look back and say, yeah, I'd probably rather have him than some of those other guys. Give me the young blood.
Oh, I think you kind of buried the lead here because you said, oh, he's 3 spots behind Tyler Warren. But what you failed to mention was he's 28 full ADP spots behind Tyler Warren in the ADP. So, you're talking about a 3-round difference here that where you're able to go get some stud in the 4th round and then still get Harold Fannin 3 rounds later. even if you have to make some moves to make it all work and everything. So like if you're just saying like tight end 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't really care necessarily what order you put them in, but when you start talking about that kind of ADP discrepancy, like I start understanding what you're saying. It's like I would much rather get Fan in where he's going than Warren where he's going. And with Warren, like I think we always respected Warren and always knew like what he could do after the catch and everything, but it always seemed kind of gadgety in college, and honestly, it kind of seemed gadgety at the beginning of the year in the NFL. And then what happened? They stopped using him in gadgety ways later on in the season, and then he just wasn't the same player. So I almost wondered, does he have to be force fed the ball? Does he have to have those gadgety around the line of scrimmage, big yak plays and stuff? Or can he actually turn into a legit tight end? Warren could be one that we talk about, tight end four. And in fact, I would probably say he's probably tight end 3 for most people, at the very least, if not tight end 2 for some people. But you start getting into is he going to be? He's an early 4th round pick, or where is he? He's a mid 4th round pick right now for DLF at the very least. Could he be a 6th, 7th, 8th round pick next year this time? Where we go like he's not terrible. He didn't completely fall off, but he's just not that exciting player that we really thought of. And that's one of those players where like, yeah, it's not going to be like a round 1 player that like it's not gonna be like Lad McConkey from last year falling off and completely ruining your team, or BTJ. It might not be that level, but you're still talking about a player that could really hurt you in the first few rounds of your drafts, or obviously if you're valuing him that way.
Yeah, agreed. And Tyler Warren, I did speak earlier that he was actually 1 slot ahead of Fannin as far as production last year and fantasy finishes, but that again is because of that just tons of targets early on in the season for Tyler Warren, and then the efficiency fell off, obviously with the quarterback play and struggles as the season went on. So like 28.6 yards per game over his last 7 appearances. That's pretty bad, despite again, terrible quarterback play. I understand all that, but I just for me, I agree with you, John. I don't think he's like a big time play type of player, Tyler Warren. But hey, we'll see. And ultimately, it's all the value game too, right? Like you said, it's a 20 spot difference. So that's what I'm picking up on.
Yeah, we already touched on George Pickens a little bit. He's wide receiver 12, 23 overall right now. That's a little too rich for my blood. We already kind of talked about why. I think, the defense is going to be better. CD is going to be healthy. I'm not expecting CD Lamb to be hurt. There's no reason to expect that, so if we're talking about like the most likely scenario, I would think that Pickens at least falls off a little bit. Doesn't mean he's going to be terrible or anything like that or ruin your team, but wide receiver 12, I don't want to draft him or value him as a top 12 wide receiver. I just don't want to do it. But then another one, this one I actually feel a little stronger about, and I just talked about how Lad McConkey already ruined your team last year. I still think the way he's being valued, he could ruin people's teams again this year, because a lot of people are expecting a bounce back, and they say, oh, it was the offensive line, it was this, it was that, whatever. I was looking at it earlier just to see, was there any reason for me to truly believe that Lad's going to take a big leap forward this year or anything like that? Usually you look at a season for a rookie and you say, what did they do in the first half of the season, the second half of the season? So I started looking at Trey Harris last year. What do you do in the first half of the season? What do you do in the second half of the season? Well, you see Harris starting to get on the field more in the second half of the season. You actually see Ladd getting off the field more in the second half of the season. And I want to say it was from week 11 on, Ladd McConkey did not surpass 45 yards receiving in any game last year. But on top of that, 8 out of his 17 games last year were below 40 yards receiving. Half of his games were below 40 yards, and 3 of his games were below 12 yards receiving. And 3 of his games were above 75 yards receiving. So like this was not a fantastic season for Lad McConkey by any means. And honestly, like I said, the back toward the back end of the season, it was all bad. I mean, it was all 20 yards, 30 yards, 10 yards, 12 yards, whatever. And you saw him Trey Harris start getting on the field in one receiver sets because he's a great run blocker. So they're like, hey, we trust you on run blocking. We trust you on routes. We trust you on everything. They were moving Trey Harris all around the field. He played 35% in the slot, 65% out wide. So he's playing a little bit of everything. And they said, even this offseason, how he can truly play any position on the field. And they feel confident with him. And Mike McDaniels even came out and said he didn't even realize how explosive Trey Harris was, and until he saw him playing, and now he's even more excited about using Trey Harris all over the field and using him as a yak player, which he was in college, which he really didn't do that much of last year. So yeah, everything was not spectacular last year for Trey Harris. Everything was not spectacular for Lad McConkey, but the truth of the matter is Lad thrived when no one was there. There was like really no one like there for competition. And it just kind of worked out where he had some huge yak plays and things that gave him big games, and everyone kind of freaked out about it. But I looked at even that first year, and it was kind of the same thing where he had a couple big blow up games and then a bunch of like down games, 40 yards, 50 yards, whatever. And yet we were still acting like he's this complete stud. So long way of saying he's still the wide receiver 20 this year. People are still holding out hope, saying no, he's going to revert back to year one. I think the year one stuff is gone. QJ has taken a step forward, whether you like truly believe in him or not. Trey Harris is a stud in the making. We're just waiting for him to completely break out. You have a Rondé Gadsden, you have David Njoku. You have the possibility of them even bringing Keenan Allen back, which I hope they don't do because I don't think they need to do it. And I just don't see Lad McConkey turning back into like a league winner or anything like that. I don't think the upside is there. So when you're drafting him at wide receiver 20, he basically has to hit his ceiling for you to even really like recoup any of that value or anything, at least in my opinion.
Maybe it's a hot take, but I'd rather have the wide receiver 45 in Dynasty ADP than Lad McConkey, and that's Ricky Pearsall, 25-year-old wide receiver who could be stepping up into a wide receiver one role for the San Francisco 49ers. And, that's a John favorite right from back in the day.
I thought I was the Ricky Pearsall guy.
Yeah. Well, I'm back, right? I mean, the prices, at different points, maybe I was not, but I'm all about it. I mean, that's almost outside of the top 100 in drafts as wide receiver 45, Ricky Pearsall. I think 32-year-old Mike Evans, he's a great player. I just don't know how much he has left in the tank. Like, he'll still probably contribute when healthy, right? But there needs to be other guys there. We know that there's multiple productive guys for San Francisco. I mean, just look what, what's his name? He just signed with the Vikings did last year, John Jennings. He even had some very spike productive weeks, and he's not the player that I don't know. He's just not a good player, in my opinion. I think Ricky Pearsall is better. I mean, Juwan Jennings for years didn't do anything in the league. And a little bit of a wide receiver friendly system there. Yeah, like Ricky Pearsall's been there for long enough. He knows what Shanahan and that offense needs. So I'm just thinking if he can stay healthy, that's going to pay off big time. He's being drafted alongside guys who are just at the end of their careers and or just guys who have not really done a whole lot, like the Jaden Higgins of the world, or like I said, towards the end of the careers, maybe the Cortland Suttons, Michael Pittman, Jaden Higgins, I think is just so unproven. Denzel Boston, I mean, the hit rates on guys like Boston are just so low. I like the young bloods, some of the young bloods, right? But I'm going to go with the slightly older option there, Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, I mean, you were giving me grief for a 25-year-old earlier, so I guess I got to, push right back and say, hey, I thought we were talking about the young bloods here, but no. All right, so I like the call. I feel like someone has to break out here at San Fran, and I really don't know who it's going to be is the problem. But when you start really think once again with common sense, you start really thinking about it. Mike Evans is 32, almost 33, and he's obviously dealt with a lot of injuries. What are the odds of him staying healthy for a full season? Very minimal. George Kittle's coming off that Achilles tear, and yeah, he's running routes, he's doing everything, he looks amazing. It's just he was such an explosive player. I really struggle to think that he's just going to be right back to who he was at, what is he, 34 years old. That's going to be kind of tough. Like you said, Juwan Jennings, who neither one of us ever thought was anything amazing, but who was the leading receiver for this team, is no longer on the team. I really think it has to be either Ricky Pearsall or Deshaun Stribling, and I don't really believe that either one of them are absolutely amazing or anything like that. But I feel like somebody has to step forward. Somebody has to take that step up, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But it would not blow my mind if it was Ricky Pearsall. And I mean, so to answer your question, yes, I do think it is a hot take that you're putting him over Lad McConkey. That being said, I love it. I love the Lad. Hey, I don't understand why Lad gets like this elite wide receiver, moniker that he gets. I don't understand it. I don't know where it came from, and so anytime I can hear someone putting Ricky Pearsall over him, I will take it 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I just think he's the discount Lab McConkey, and potentially more upside, right? More opportunity for him to really be in a more fantasy-friendly type of wide receiver one role. And it's just a matter of health, but that's kind of the same thing with McConkey to a degree as well, because McConkey had his injury history going back to his time at Georgia. So, I think I agree with everything you said there. I don't think we need to dive further into him.
All right, yeah. I will say it's the only thing that's made me even draft any Deshaun Stribling. And it was only when he was a complete steal. Like I drafted him at like 210, 3, or whatever. I'm not taking him earlier than that. I want to say I took him in the third round a couple times. Maybe it was late second round a couple times. But it's just like somebody has to take a step forward there, and somebody has to be healthy. And if it's not this year, then what happens next year? Because Mike Evans is not going to be on the team anymore, and who knows what will happen with Kittle. So I just feel like one of those guys has to step forward. Unfortunately, we haven't seen it with Pearsall yet, but it's mostly been injuries, and I definitely try to be as optimistic about injuries as possible. Which is, we can get into. We we had talked about some of the players that could obviously could fall off, could hurt your team, and all that kind of stuff. But we haven't really talked about too many steals or players that are kind of forgotten about right now. One of the players that has dealt with a lot of injuries, but I feel like it gets misconstrued a lot, is Jonathan Brooks. And I know he's kind of becoming the new hotness recently, where people are starting to get excited about him, hearing all the clips about how explosive he is on the field and this and that and everything. But then everyone still kind of gives the caveat of he's torn his ACL twice. Well, I want to be very clear about that, because maybe Aaron can be the tiebreaker here or whatever, or tell me if I'm right or wrong here. But I'm not counting it as a torn ACL twice. I'm counting it as a graft that didn't take, and he struggled with it all throughout the off season and everything. And then he tried to play on it, and then he obviously had issues with it. Because if we look at the off season that Jonathan Brooks had last year, he tore his ACL before the season started, before the college season started. He should have been 10 months out, should have put him at June, 100% healthy, all that kind of stuff last year. Well, they said he's going to be ready for training camp. He's going to be 100%. He's going to be amazing. What happened? Training camp started. He's not out there yet. He's not 100%. We got to do whatever. Then, okay, but he's going to be 100% for the preseason. What happened? No, he's not ready yet. We'll see at the beginning of the year. Okay, well, they start him out on PUP. He misses a few games. Okay, now he's finally healthy. We're ready to put him out there. You're talking about well over a year of recovery time. That's just a graft that didn't take. And then the doctors talked about how, it didn't take properly. They actually went to a specialist who his job is literally repairing ACL repairs that didn't take properly. So like people look at it as two separate injuries or whatever. I'm looking at it as one injury that wasn't repaired right. I don't know if it truly matters when, if I'm just sitting here trying to look at it optimistically. But I don't want to put that like injury prone label or whatever. It just kind of makes me think that it wasn't repaired right. Now, obviously, we seem to think that he's fully healthy, ready to go, and all that kind of stuff. There's no reason to truly be scared about it. Could Jonathan Brooks really be a game changer for our teams? Because I know I had high hopes for him originally. I know you. I'm pretty sure you did as well. And we really have not gotten too much out of that yet.
Right. In theory, I mean, I want to root for Jonathan Brooks, right? Well, I do root for him, right? I am certainly hoping that he comes back and can recover from those devastating knee injuries. But at the end of the day, that's a lot of time rehabbing. That's a lot of time not being 100%, losing muscle mass, having to regain muscle mass, having to learn how to run again, how to cut, how to, all those things that he needs to do with confidence. And maybe he does have it back, but that's also wear and tear on the knee, whether it's fair to him or not, and whether you want to argue the nuances of what those repairs and whatnot did to the knee. There's no doubt that that's going to shorten his span there. Not that we're looking like 5 years out for running backs in this range, right? We're just looking for guys who can just capture a backfield, maybe hold it down for a couple of years. And I think that's a fair shout out there. He's not as young, but I'd rather have a Blake Corum who's going just before Jonathan Brooks in drafts, because Blake Corum, you don't have to project as much. Like, we've seen very, very high spike weeks. He's in a good offense. Kyron Williams obviously being there, but just, I mean, he's an injury away from Blake Corum just being a league-winning type of player. And if you can get that type of player at RB36 in the 110 range, 117 range, I think it is there, I'm all about it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of gross names when you get this late in drafts for running backs. So I definitely don't mind the Jonathan Brooks shout out. That injury history, it's dicey, but of course that's the whole deal, right? If he somehow bounces back, then it could pay off in a big way.
Well, it's kind of tough because, like you said, the player right ahead of him is Blake Corum as far as running backs are concerned. But then you start even going ahead of him, Jonah Coleman. Like, I know you were a Jonah Coleman guy at one point, but are you taking Jonah Coleman over Jonathan Brooks? Like, I can't do it. You get to Rico Dowdle, Tony Pollard, and I'm going up. I'm going higher in the ADP, not lower. So Zach Charbonnet also coming off a November ACL tear, and technically got replaced. I mean, it's hard to say, exactly what happened there, but I think we feel pretty good about Jadarian Price, Ramondre Stevenson, Kyle Monungai. Okay, this is the one that just gets me. Why people? What about Kyle Monungai's season last year? He's the Lad McConkey of running backs. And actually, no, that's not even fair. Lad actually has talent. Kyle Monungai does not have talent. Why is he the RB30 and a 93rd overall player? Like, I just think that people have such hatred for DeAndre Swift for whatever reason that they feel like they have to take whatever running back out, is on that team. And they try to do with other running backs. Like, Kyle Monungai had like 2 games where he did anything last year. What makes you think all of a sudden that things are going to be different or whatever? He is a plotter of all plotters, and I do not understand the Kyle Monungai stuff. But that's what I'm saying. Like Chuba Hubbard, who obviously Jonathan Brooks is dealing with, a 27-year-old who's essentially lost his starting job like multiple times already. These players are all ahead of Jonathan Brooks. Like I'm taking the chance, and I think this is June. I think the way that we're hearing about Brooks right now, I think things are going to change by July ADP. But that's also why we're looking at June ADP, because this is the time that we're in, obviously. But then even more importantly, it's a time where you're really trying to figure out, your rankings, your team, all that kind of stuff. And so I think this is the time to be ahead of the game and say, I want Jonathan Brooks. I don't want Kyle Monungai. And oh my God, if you could trade Kyle Monungai for Jonathan Brooks, yeah, please. And possibly, according to this ADP, possibly get something on top too.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that people are gonna value Monungai a good amount above because they look at the system too, and I do think that that's a valid point. It's like, who do you want, like that Ben Johnson running back, potential one. even if he's a plotter, I mean, we saw what Jamal Williams did for years there. Or actually, it was just that 1 year basically in Detroit with all those touchdowns.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, if Swift somehow gets banged up, which he's done, multiple times in his career, or kind of falls off for some reason, or something happens. I mean, I'm not here defending Monangai, but I do like the situation a little bit more, I guess. But you're right. That's just a total like dead zone for running backs. That's getting, through that dead zone. Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing as far as that's just a dicey area. It's nice to wait on running back there, right? And maybe you can grab a guy like him, or you can wait even further, and maybe you think of Woody Marks somehow does get that job there in Houston if Monty's a little bit washed up, like if all this talk that they're hyping Montgomery up. If that doesn't come to fruition, I'm not a big Woody Marks guy, right? I don't think he wasn't a very good prospect, but he's a capable receiving option. Or you look down further, can't remember, like Tyjae Spears. I mean, I think there's just a shot that if Pollard, again, injured, something happens there, yeah, Tyjae Spears, he could definitely step into a prominent role in that backfield. And you could say the same thing, maybe Dylan Sampson there, RB48. That's a young guy, right? Second-year player for the Cleveland Browns if something happens to Quinshon Judkins, who's coming off his own injury. But I don't know, it starts getting pretty gross at the running back positions as you get deep.
It does. That's why I wanted to mention Brooks. I mean, we could also talk about. Oh man, my mind just went blank. Who's the running back for the Packers that has obviously been hurt?
Marshawn Lloyd.
Marshawn Lloyd, but I want to hold out hope. That one's a little more extreme, and we can say there's been multiple injuries, there's been multiple things, so maybe you can actually put the injury prone label on him. But kind of getting back up the list here, it brings me to, I'm just kind of skimming through and just seeing what really jumps out at me. And, we've talked about some players that are a little higher than they should be, a little lower than they should be. But I'm looking at one who, might not be egregious, but I think it's kind of where, like, Ladd McConkey has just become a name that people are like, oh, yep, elite, whatever. I feel like we're kind of doing the same thing with Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver 28 overall. We can't be overly excited about the Philly landing spot there. We've been dealing with very similar issues with DBS for Devontae Smith for years now, where he was technically the wide receiver 2 behind AJ Brown in a low volume passing game and everything. And, I feel like we're looking at Mekhi Lemon, who is not Devontae Smith. He is not that level of wide receiver. So we can't even, really compare the two, but we can say he's going to be at least second fiddle on the team, and it's a low volume offense and that kind of thing. You see players like Jameson Williams, who is already proving that, he is at the very least a very explosive player who can get you those big win games, where you get 30 points and obviously, even though we know he can also have some down weeks, we know that those big weeks are the ones that actually win you weeks, and that's what you need. And I don't know that Mekhi Lemon's going to have those kind of weeks. He could settle in and end up with a decent role. I don't know that he's going to be getting you 30 points or anything like that anytime soon. So I just don't see that. Obviously we're going through different positions here, but I was just trying to stick with wide receivers. Alec Pierce, directly after Mekhi Lemon, he's dealing with the injuries and stuff, so that one doesn't really bother me anymore as much. But you start getting into like DJ Moore. Am I taking the wide receiver 1 for the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen, or am I taking the wide receiver 2 in a low volume Philadelphia offense? Yeah, give me DJ Moore. I know that there's obviously an age discrepancy in everything, but people want to act like DJ Moore is just dead. He's 29 years old. At the very least, he has 2 years. If you get 2 really solid years of DJ Moore level, wide receiver 1 for Buffalo level out of Moore, I think you're going to be extremely happy, and you're going to say, why did I stick with Mekhi Lemon, who's getting me 8 points a week or 11 points a week or whatever it is?
Well, it's the boat versus the box deal, right? I mean, hey, I mean, look at, Micaiah Lemon. He could be anything. He could even be a boat, right? But a younger boat would be kind of nice, right? To re-roll it and then hit on the next DJ Moore, a guy who, solid enough player for years, but then when he gets into the right situation, he can really eat up a little bit better production. So, I mean, I totally. Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from with the Micaiah Lemon thing as far as trying to ask for immediate production. And I will say at the tight end position, it gets kind of fun when you get deeper into these drafts. Like, I'm not going to go through the obvious, like Aronda Gadsden, right? He got some nice upside there and whatnot. And I still like Dalton Kincaid at tight end 15. Like, that seems like pretty good value there. But I'm getting even deeper into drafts, or at least into this ADP, and I'm seeing like Terrence Ferguson and even just the other tight end there, Max Clare, both drafted pretty highly and valued highly by the LA Rams. I mean, I think those guys, one of them could pop. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to put money on one or the other. I think Ferguson's got the leg up there in production, in explosiveness, all those types of things. But so yeah, that intrigues me. And then, I had one other name there too. I don't know if I can really get fully on board with Justin Jolly, but he's going so cheap there at tight end 38. It's like 242nd overall. Like, yeah, I could roll the dice on him. Like, that's not a bad option at all. So even like the Brendan Strages of the world, I'm not a strange truther, but when you get later into these drafts, take a shot on these guys with some athleticism, some upside with their role, and potentially getting a lot of targets. Eli Raridan, also tight end, rookie for the Patriots. Somebody's got to catch passes from Drake May. Like, Drake May is a great quarterback. We've got A.J. Brown there who's aging. Who else is going to step up? Hunter Henry, he's aging, that's for sure.
Yeah, I like those calls. I think tight end is going to be interesting. I drafted a lot of Max Clare, and like the Rams used 13 personnel more than any other team last year. I think it was somewhere in like the 35 to 40% range of their plays were three tight ends on the field. People say, oh, why would you draft Max Clare? Like, he's completely buried. Three tight ends on the field, like he might be on the field like week one. He might see that. And then obviously, you talk about injuries and everything else. There's a chance that he could really be out there with Terrence Ferguson. They could both be viable. The way that they used their tight ends last year. I mean, I don't know about you. I won some championships off of Colby Parkinson towards the end of the year, like getting me like 12, 13, 14 points a week as I'm throwing them into, like a flex spot, where I start 12, and I'm like, hey, 12 points is amazing there. There's a lot of people getting 4 or 5 points from their 12th, starter. So I will take that guy. So I can easily see that kind of stuff happening. I'm going through, obviously the list is getting more difficult the more we look at it. Obviously you have some player like I said, Trey Harris is wide receiver 63, 140 overall. I really think that it's hard to say exactly who's going to break out, who's going to do what in Los Angeles, but I feel like Trey Harris is going to be a lot higher than wide receiver 63 this time next year. So I would definitely try. And obviously, I'm not just talking here. Aaron knows I have made some moves to get Trey Harris on my team. I drafted a lot of them last year. And it was one of the coolest things this year. Everyone talked about how much they hated this draft class and how much they hated everything. I had so much fun, and I'm trading back one spot and getting Trey Harris thrown in. And like, you want to talk about having fun and just getting players for free. I mean, if he blows up, you're literally talking about league winning upside from trading back one spot in a draft that no one liked. Just because people say it's a down class doesn't mean you can't make some moves and get some stuff done.
Your Lad McConkey hate goes so deep that you're even drafting Brennan Thompson in a majority of the leagues. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, I mean, getting really deep. I mean, Cyrus Allen, he's not even being drafted in the top 100 wide receivers, and he lands in a great spot for the Kansas City Chiefs. And hey, I'm not saying that I'm some sort of like Cyrus Allen truther, like there's a high probability that he hits, but that's a fun landing spot. He's been impressing. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather have like Xavier Worthy, so much, right? I mean, Xavier Worthy's kind of interesting this year with the Rashee Rice issues out there, but I'm just saying deep Yeah, deep in the draft, Cyrus Allen, the deepest of leagues, stash him away if you can. I think the Troy Franklin, push down ADP. There's still at least some interest for me there. Hey, I'm worried about the target share that he's going to command this year for Denver, right? That's not great, but still think there's something with him as a 23-year-old wide receiver. You could probably tell us, are you still holding out hope for Alec Amenor for the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, actually, that's a great call out because I think I won't even say I think. I'm looking at his name right now. Wide receiver 83, 198th overall in ADP. And, I think as soon as Carnell Tate was drafted there, people said, hey, Io Manor's just done. He's dead. I just saw something literally today that said Io Manor's actually still projected to be the the third of the starting three wide receivers. So you're really looking at Carnell Tate, Wan'Dale Robinson, and then Io Manor as your three starters, and then obviously other players will mix in DK and maybe even Calvin Ridley or whatever, even though he's mostly dead. But that just goes to show. I mean, he proved it last year. He was a quality option for a not quality team and a really bad quarterback, or at least at the very least a very young quarterback that has a lot to prove and a lot to do and needs to take a step forward. He did all that already, 600 yards. He led the team in receiving. I don't know what else you could ask from a fourth round pick. People hated on him then, and they're obviously hating on him now, I think. But if it wasn't for the player that's 3 spots ahead of him, two wide receiver spots ahead of him, and Elijah Surratt, I think I would say Io Manor's one of the most egregious ranks. But Elijah Surratt at wide receiver 81 just blows my mind. Like, I know we're talking about a low volume offense, low volume passing offense, and we just talked about how much we love Zay Flowers and everything. But we're saying Zay Flowers is a top 12-ish, wide receiver. That's great. But Elijah Surratt's not going to be wide receiver 81. Like, he is going to be the wide receiver 2 on this team. I truly believe that. Mark Andrews has fallen off an absolute cliff. They just got rid of Isaiah Likely. Like, there's no one on this team that is going to beat out Elijah Surratt, in my opinion. Jacoby Lane wishes he was Elijah Surratt. And Jacoby Lane's young. They drafted him for a reason. Like, they want to try and mold him and do things, their way, and that's fun. That doesn't get on the field in year one. Elijah Surratt's proven he's a championship winner. You can make all these narrative arguments and everything, but like, the dude just wins at every level of football. And there's no way next year at this time that beyond injury, that'd be the only thing that I would say that would hold him back. There's almost no way that Elijah Surratt will be wide receiver 81 this time next year. I think he'll at the very least be in the 60s. He'll probably be even higher than that, the way that I have it ranked.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think we shouted out some good guys, good players. I mean, at least good guys to take shots on. There's no guarantees, right? Especially as you get deeper into these ADPs in these rounds. But at least there's some juice there to the profile. There's some potential.
Yeah, and this one might not be fair, but like, Stephon Diggs is starting to get some hype now that his troubles behind him. I know we're talking about the youth and everything, but I'm looking at Stephon Diggs at wide receiver 94, and I'm just going like, he's completely forgotten about at this point. But if you can get him for cheap, he's probably going to end up on some kind of contender, and you're probably going to get some solid usage out of him. And I was trying to see that there's Marshawn Lloyd, RB70, 230 overall. I mean, I get it, man. It's so tough to believe. They say that he's changed things. They say that he's healthy. It sounds like a joke, but they made a big deal because he did like 9 practices in a row without getting hurt, that kind of stuff. But Josh Jacobs is already starting to fall off. He's obviously dealing with legal trouble. They've talked about the commissioner exempt list and things like that. And as of right now, they haven't brought anyone else in. So, I mean, it could be the Marshawn Lloyd show. It really could be. And I tell you what, I'm sitting at like 40% Marshawn Lloyd. If that happens, I will be a very happy camper.
Yeah, I mean that's truly patience, right? I understand waiting a couple of years here for Jonathan Brooks and whatnot, who had a better profile in my opinion, but Marshawn Lloyd, man, the guy's been dealing with injuries since early college, right? And I mean, he's done nothing for like what 3 4 years, but just be injured constantly. So, but that would be the dream, right? If he can finally, hey, the fifth year's a shot or whatever he is, maybe his fourth
Hey,
year, but
all it takes is 1 year, man. All like I'm not
I
even
know.
asking for much. I'm asking for one season out of
I
him.
think you're
If
asking
he
for a lot from him.
I probably am, but I mean, if he could retire next year, just give me one solid season, and he can do whatever he wants after that. He can retire. I will have a bottle of Woodford Double Double waiting for him with all my winnings, and we will we'll do that. Oh, by the way, you showed me that you got a bottle of Woodford Double Double for Father's Day. Did you crack it open? Did you try her out?
I did sample. Great recommendation, John. Yeah, shout out to my wife. She, yeah, made a good decision there. Good choice. Good taste.
Well, happy belated Father's Day. We already said that to each other, but happy Father's
Thanks.
Day to
Thanks.
you.
You
Happy
too.
Father's Day to all of our listeners and the mothers who have to be the father and all that kind of good stuff. Everyone taking care of the kids. Just keep on doing it. Try not to beat them. But we have to have more youths for our youth movement as we're sitting here talking about them tonight. So we appreciate you guys listening. We could probably keep going with names that will probably never do anything. And that's kind of the point is, eventually you hit that line, and it's like, there's probably a 1% chance of any of these names ever doing anything ever again. But yet people will still count them as, oh, that's a starter. That's one of my starters this year. That's one of my this year. That's going to be a stud in 3 years. That kind of thing.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys listening. Hopefully, it was a little different than what we normally do, talking about some Dynasty players. We'll obviously get back into the college stuff and the Devy stuff here in the near future. I think we have some pretty good plans for the next few weeks. So we'll have some good ones for you guys. We appreciate you guys listening. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.